moment, but let Suraj Yengde respond, because Suraj, the notion of modernity, and Ambedkar writes about it and has spoken about it. Actually, in a way, it freed and unshackled many of the backward caste groups, many of the Dalits in particular, which hadn't happened in a sense before the 18th century, where the caste system was as rigid as ever. So in a way, the unshackling of many of the caste boundaries in particular opened up as a result of exposure to this modern education. I'm not using the word English, but modern values. Do you agree?
Yeah, thank you, Rajdeep. It's good to see you. And I agree with almost everyone who has contributed, from William to Professor Mukherjee here. And the agreement is almost, we have to find a balance, which of course you're also advocating. Now the question is, it's not about Macaulay per se. So if we reduce Macaulay to something of a colonial hangover, then where do we go? Do we go to Manu? And so the question is not necessarily Modi versus Macaulay, is it Manu versus Macaulay? And if you go back to the values of Manu, we are back to square one, which really challenges the ethos of Indian constitution and democracy. Now let me tell you, with English language that we have, the way Ashish Nandi, as you has pointed out, as a cricket is an Indian game, so English has also undergone its own formulation. So Indian English is different than British English. So when I went to England way back in 2011, I wrote an essay in English, and my professor in the UK couldn't really surmise the argument because I was educated in a state medium English school, as opposed to those international or central board English education, which is heavily subsidized by the cultural capital of the West, as opposed to the state medium English schools, which really give you both of the two worlds. And now, for example, if we really have to decolonize, we really fall into a very riskier trap. Do we go back to the hegemonic ideals of Brahminical hierarchy? Or, and I agree with Prime Minister Modi, who was saying in his speech with reference to Macaulay, that the younger generation doesn't look it as our heritage, but just looks at mortars and bricks, which I appreciate. However, we need to have an insertion of a rationalistic thought. And around the same time, 1835, when minutes were written, about the same time and 2 years later, James Prinsep deciphers Brahmi script that gives rise to this huge canvas of Buddhist economy of philosophies that are just that are just available. And so what we see here, English medium education has given rise to elites that are also what we call now English medium Hindutva, which is, the president of BJP himself went to this English medium school, JP Nadda, getting educated, and the people who are opposing English language, which I appreciate, without really accounting their own complicity in this, where their children are studying here abroad, where I am at, in UK and other parts of the world.
That's interesting, because I'll come to you, Shruti.
Agenda.
No, one minute.
Very important issue we are debating, Mr. Aditya Mukherjee.
I want Suraj Yengde, put the volume down. Suraj, you should get the final word. Suraj, the final word. Is this a wider debate between the old elites and the new elites? And in some way, a debate that should be had. Nothing wrong with it.
I think it is, and it's a very enriching conversation, Rajdeep. This panel itself is quite diverse, and I agree in a way that I am also in favor of going back to the native roots. But the point is, where is that anchor? Where is that core that we are going to find out? And Rakesh had incorrectly stated that Phule was not well versed in English. I mean, his commissions and all were written in English. Though I take his point, I think it's what he is really pointing out, which is really the challenge that the post-colonial elites brought forth, which is the whole project of decolonization, and now the right world over is claiming on to the idea of decolonization. My reservations with these debates is, what do we do with the existent topography of language and knowledge that is there? Now, if you ask anybody, what medium of instructions would you send your child into, anybody, and this is me talking, in Nanded, for example, and they would most likely say English language. I'll tell you an example. At Harvard, I met a student who was enrolled in an English studies department, and he was from Karnataka, and he was taking lessons in Karnataka in Kannada language at Harvard. And because his education, though he grew up in Karnataka in one of those posh boarding schools, and I looked at it and I was like, how tragic that is. But that is what this new elite has provided us and really made us look inferior. And what happens is the standards of English that we are measuring against each other, and here the citation of Fanon is really important, and I'm amazed, how that Fanon gets appropriated and smacked on the face. We really need to think about what does this culture of language give us as an outcome.
Right.
What I think it essentially does is that if we are able to decolonize and de-Brahminize, if we are able to sanitize this with the elements of this aristocratic elite, as well as the complicits, the satraps that were here, 565 princely states existed, they were in British suzerainty. What kind of decolonization are we talking about? So these people, for nearly 200 years, were in the protection, who are now reclaimed as nationalist heroes. That history is so messier, and everybody almost who were complicit ruling class have their hands in bloods, not just the British.
That's a wonderful way to put it there, Suraj. And I think you've given us, as have all our panelists, a debate which has truly enlightened us. I hope to see many more such debates on television, done without noise and done without confrontation, because I think